Shalom, and welcome back to Parsha Highlights and Insights. This is Rabbi Abraham Fisher, speaking to you from a very rainy Yerushalayim. And this week's Parasha is Yitro, a Parasha that contains many central ideas and mitzvot. It's a really pivotal mitzvah parasha. So let's get right to it. Let's take a look at an outline of the parasha. Parashat Yitro has two major topics. First, as the name of the parasha suggests, the first part is about Yitro, that is to say, the father-in-law of Moshe. And the second part is about the actual revelation at Sinai, Ma'amad Har Sinai. We'll talk more about that as we go on. The parasha begins that Yitro, who is Moshe's father-in-law, comes to join Israel. Remember, Moshe, when he came to the land of Midian and helped out Yitro's 7 daughters who were working as shepherdesses, he came to live with Yitro, and Moshe married Yitro's daughter, Tzipporah. And he lived there for a number of years before Hashem summoned him to save Bnei Israel. When he was there, they had 2 children, Gershom and Eliezer. So Yitro now, who has been living in Midian, comes to meet up with Bnei Israel because he heard everything, maybe in a general sense, but he heard everything that had happened to Bnei Israel and what Hashem did to Egypt and on behalf of and for the benefit of Israel. When he comes, he brings with him Tzipporah, Moshe's wife, and their 2 children, Gershom and Eliezer. Now, this raises a question, because when Moshe first returned to Egypt from Midian, the Torah says that he brought his wife and his children with him. So why is Yitro now bringing them? Didn't Moshe bring them with him? So the answer is, as explained by the Midrash, is that actually when Moshe and his family arrived in Egypt and they met with Moshe's older brother Aharon, Aharon said, according to the Midrash, that it's not wise to bring your family here. You are here because Hashem summoned you to be here. He commanded you to be here. However, your family do not need to be here. And who knows, they may be taking a risk that they will be enslaved or harmed in some way. And so, on Aharon's advice, Moshe sent Tzipporah and the children back. But now that the Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus, has taken place, it's time to bring this family, to reunite the family, and Yitro brings them. But Yitro also wants to, or maybe primarily, wants to learn more about what has transpired. He heard in a general sense. Moshe greets Yitro, gives him a great deal of honor, and tells Yitro in greater detail everything that has happened to Bnei Israel, and everything that Hashem did to the Egyptians as well. Yitro's reaction is an expression of joy. He blesses Hashem for all that Hashem has done, and he accepts and acknowledges that Hashem is indeed the one and only God. And then there's a festive meal, which Yitro has with Moshe and all of the leaders. It's a meal where sacrifices have been brought, and they eat from some of those sacrifices. And so this is a very momentous occasion. It then says, we learn, about an incident in which Yitro gives Moshe valuable advice. What happens is, it says that on the next day, Yitro observes how Moshe sits in judgment over the people all day. Anyone who has a problem, a legal issue, brings it before Moshe, and that means he has to be involved in that all day long, which raises yet another question, and that is, if this is before the Torah has been given, then on what basis is Moshe judging the people? There's no Torah that binds them to observe the laws, to observe the mitzvot. And it's for this reason that Chazal, and Rashi says this idea as well, says that this incident, which is said to happen on the next day, is not the next day after Yitro arrives, but it's the day after Yom Kippur. Just to remind you, hope I'm not spoiling this for people, but after Moshe goes up to Har Sinai, receives the tablets, he comes down, he sees children of Israel sinning with the sin of the golden calf. We'll get to that later on in the book of Shemot. And breaks the tablets, goes back up, asks for forgiveness, finally obtains forgiveness, and comes down with the second set of luchot, the second set of tablets, on Yom Kippur, on the 10th day of the 7th month, the month that we call Tishrei. So the Midrash says that this incident involving Yitro giving Moshe advice and observing Moshe judging the people, it's after they've already received the Torah and after they've sinned and obtained forgiveness, and then Moshe judges based on the mitzvot that they've been given and that they've committed themselves to. So what the Torah is doing is it's essentially taking different incidents from the life of Yitro, from the interaction between Yitro and Bnei Israel, and putting them all together here, even though in fact they happen in a different order. So here's how Yitro observes Moshe judging the people on the basis of the mitzvot, and he says that what you're doing, Moshe, is a problem, because you're sitting in judgment all day long. It's very difficult for you. In addition, it's difficult for the people to have to wait in line all day long to receive the instruction. And therefore, Yitro's advice basically has three parts. One, Moshe, your responsibility is to teach the people. Teach the people the Torah that you have received from Hashem in a general sense, so they understand the mitzvot. And it'll also help for them to know when to ask a question. Then, instead of you doing all of the judging yourself, Moshe, you should appoint, that is to say, select and train judges at different levels, have responsibilities over different groups of people, larger groups, smaller groups, at a kind of a system of hierarchy. These should be people, of course, of intellectual ability, their knowledge, they have learned what you've taught them, but also they have to be people of appropriate character, people who are not open to a bribe because they're going to judge. And Yitro says that those, what we might call lower court judges, will judge the cases that are brought within the group that they're responsible for. And then the final part is those cases that are very big, the biggest cases, should be taken by you. These should not be dealt with by the lower judges, but they should be dealt with by you. And what do we mean by biggest? So it seems that what he has in mind, those cases that have the most at stake. Let's say if it's a financial matter, those that involve a larger claim high claims court that involves cases that involve very large amounts of money. Moshe takes this advice, um, but he makes one important alteration in the way he adapts, he takes and implements this advice. Um, the determination of which cases should come to him will not be based on the size of the case, but rather on the base of the difficulty of the case. If the lower judges who have been selected and trained and authorized, if they are capable of judging a case, then they're capable of judging. It's only the cases that are too difficult for them, those are the cases that will go to Moshe. And then, right after that, we're told that Yitro returns to Midian, but we know from later on in the Torah that Yitro doesn't return to Midian before the giving of the Torah. He must return to the Torah not only after the giving of the Torah, but as we'll find out much later on, it's after they've traveled in the desert for a period of time and are actually beginning to travel towards the land of Israel. So here again, the Torah is taking a third incident from the life of Yitro, which is not immediate, but happens later on, where Moshe allows Yitro to return to the land of Midian, and he does so. And what is his purpose in returning? What does he hope to accomplish? Well, Yitro is what we might call a ben Noach, someone who has not become part of the Jewish people, but he is committed to the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide laws, which includes renouncing of idolatry and the like. And so what he's going to do is he's going to go back to where he comes from in order to teach the world, to teach his family about monotheism. We then come to the second part of the parasha, the revelation at Sinai, Ma'amad Har Sinai, the revelation of God's presence, as well as the beginning, the basis of the mitzvot. We'll talk about the revelation soon. First, we're told that the entire nation journeys and they come to the wilderness of Sinai, and they arrive there on the first day of the third month. That's the month that we nowadays know as Sivan. And this is one piece of evidence that the giving of the Torah took place in Sivan, probably very close to, if not actually on, Shavuot. This whole discussion whether the Torah was given on the 6th day of Sivan or the 7th day of Sivan, but it's very, very close, and that establishes a connection between Shavuot and the giving of the Torah. And therefore, that's what we call Shavuot, among other names. We call it the time of the giving of our Torah. So the nation arrives and they encamp facing the mountain. We then have a series of Moshe's ascents and descents between the camp and the top of the mountain, because the top of the mountain is the place where he communes with Hashem. Hashem tells Moshe to tell the people what is going to be achieved, or at least aspired to, by the giving of the Torah, namely that there'll be a kingdom of priests and a holy people. That is what they are going to become. What is meant by this? Holy people, that they're going to be holy, they're going to be distinct, they're going to have laws that are unique to them, which will also be more restrictive. A kingdom of priests, one of the standard explanations of that expression is that in the same way as the Kohanim serve the people by making it by teaching them and serving as a role model to the rest of the people as to how to properly worship Hashem. So that will be the function, the role of Bnei Israel vis-a-vis the rest of the world. Namely, they're going to teach the rest of the world about serving Hashem, worshiping Hashem, being committed to Hashem, and they'll serve as role models. In other words, the role of the Jewish people vis-a-vis the nations of the world is to lead them, guide them towards universal recognition of Hashem. Moshe goes down and tells the elders and everything that Hashem has said, and the response of the people is, we will do na'aseh, we will do all that Hashem has said. So there's agreement that they are committed to do what Hashem has said. And then Moshe goes back up and, proper protocol, delivers the people's response to Hashem. Of course, Hashem has heard it, but it's appropriate to bring it back, and so he brings that response. Then Hashem gives some instructions to Moshe. First of all, as a result of this revelation where the people will hear, observe, they'll experience themselves my speaking to you, as a result of that, that will help them to listen to you and to believe in you, because they themselves are going to experience a type of divine revelation, of prophecy. It may not be the same level as your divine revelation, but at least they will understand, once they've experienced it on their own level, on a much lower level, what it's like, and then they can extrapolate from that what it's like, but multiplied, and therefore they will listen to you, they'll believe you, they'll trust you. Next, Hashem says to tell the people that it is time to prepare for the actual revelation. The preparation involves separation of husbands and wives, cleansing, changing clothes, wearing clean clothes, preparing for themselves spiritually as well as physically for this momentous occasion where Hashem is going to speak to the entire nation. But also, the people have to be warned that the mountain is off limits. They will stand around the mountain, but they must not go up on the mountain, nor may they even allow the animals to go up onto the mountain. The mountain will be a holy place, not a place for anyone to be during the time that God's presence is there. However, when the shofar sounds at the end, then that will signal permission for people to ascend the mountain, because Hashem's presence will no longer be there. And so Moshe descends and instructs the people according to everything that Hashem has said. And then we come to the actual revelation, the revelation of God's presence on the top of the mountain. On the third day, the people have been preparing themselves. There is a combination of divine manifestations. There's lightning, there's thunder, there's the sound of a shofar that is getting louder and louder, which of course a person isn't able to do, because usually after a period of time, the sound of a shofar, if somebody blows, the sound gets weaker, not stronger. And also the mountain begins to quake. This means that Hashem's presence is there. Moshe ascends in order to receive further instructions from Hashem, and Hashem says, go descend and warn them again. And although Moshe says, well, it's not suggested, it's not necessary, they've already been warned, Hashem says, go down, and that's because it's important to warn, when there's something worth warning about, to warn repeatedly, especially very close to the moment when that warning really must be remembered. And so Hashem speaks to Bnei Israel and tells them the Aseret HaDibrot, the Decalogue. Just as a parenthetical remark, I do not like the term Ten Commandments for this term for a few reasons. First of all, what the Torah calls them is Aseret Hadvarim, and then in later Hebrew, it's known as Aseret HaDibrot. Aseret is 10, and Dibrot or Devarim means statements, utterances, pronouncements. It's not the word for commandments. The word for commandments, as I'm sure we know, is mitzvah, mitzvot. It doesn't say Aseret HaMitzvot. So it's just an incorrect translation of the term by which it's always known, either Aseret HaDibrot or Aseret HaDvarim. My other problem with the term Ten Commandments is that it suggests that these are the only commandments or the most important commandments, and that is a dangerous idea. Our tradition, our Masorah teaches us that there are 613 commandments, and they're all important. We still have to talk about the role of the Aseret HaDibrot vis-a-vis the rest of the Torah. So rather than saying the Ten Commandments, I prefer the term Decalogue, which means 10-part law, because it is a statement, or it's a group of statements, all coming from Hashem. Now, there's so much to be said about the Aseret HaDibrot, but a few important general points. One is that there are 10 pronouncements, 10 statements. Most of the statements sound like they are commanding. The first one, there is a little bit of a dispute as to whether it is to be regarded as a commandment. The majority view holds that it is, even though it's not phrased as a commandment. It's I am Hashem, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. But according to the Rambam and most others, that means that the first statement is that I must be acknowledged as God, or put differently, the first mitzvah is to know, not believe, but know, is a better word, to know that God exists, to be aware of the existence of God, and to keep that awareness in one's mind. And there are 10 of them. They break down basically 5 between man and Hashem, and 5 between man and man. Between man and Hashem, the awareness of God, rejection of idolatry, rejection of the swearing falsely, using Hashem's name in vain, the mitzvah of observing Shabbat, and also the commandment to honor one's parents. It's interesting because that's not a simple between man and man, because one's parents are not regular people. One's parents are kind of a link between oneself and God. It's through our parents that we learn about God. The other 5 between man and man are prohibitions, such as the prohibition against murder and against stealing. As for mitzvot, commandments, out of the 613 commandments, the Rambam, for example, holds that within the Aseret HaDibrot, there are 14 mitzvot, 14 commandments. Another reason not to call these the 10 commandments, because there are more than 10 commandments. But as we said, there are 613 commandments throughout the entire Torah, and the role of the Aseret HaDibrot is to serve as archetypes, kind of headings for all of the 613 mitzvot. As a matter of fact, there are a number of commentaries that are devoted to the issue of determining how to group all of the other mitzvot underneath each one of the Aseret HaDibrot. Now, the people's reaction to the Aseret HaDibrot, to this revelation of God's presence, to this national prophecy, a few reactions. One reaction is fear. The primary reaction is fear. And they say to Moshe, instead of us continuing to hear Hashem speak, have Hashem speak to you, because that's been happening. You speak to Hashem, and have Hashem speak to you, and then you will teach us what Hashem has said. Moshe assures them not to fear, but it seems that this is the way they want things to continue, namely with through Moshe. Now, the very last part of the parasha continues this, not with the dibrot, but other mitzvot, which it seems were taught by Hashem to Moshe, and Moshe to the people. And the mitzvot seem to be devoted to worshiping Hashem, appropriate and inappropriate ways of worshiping Hashem. First, the Torah says not to make gods of gold and silver. And although the prohibition against idolatry has been mentioned before, this adds yet another dimension, and that is, do not make representations of what you think is God or what you think are the angels in order to use them as a method of worshiping Hashem. No, that's not the way to worship Hashem, so don't make these representations. One of the words in this context, and we'll see this shortly, is the word iti. Don't make with me, meaning don't make such images, even if you are still with me, even if you're not rejecting me. Nevertheless, this is not the appropriate way to stay loyal to Hashem. And then the last part of the parasha talks about the altar. It says that when you make an altar, make it of earth, which means connected to the earth. If you do use stones for this purpose, they should be unhewn stones that have not been dressed, that have not been chiseled, that have not been touched by a metal instrument. And the way the Torah puts it in very stark terms, because in essence you have taken your sword, even if it isn't a sword that you use, but any metal instrument is reminiscent of a sword. You've taken your sword to it and you've desecrated it, and that's the rule, that that no metal instruments may be involved in the preparation of the sanctuary. Certainly not the altar, the mizbeach. And finally, there are to be no stairs to go up to the altar. The altar goes up to a certain height. It's necessary. Go up to a certain height, and then you stand on the top if you're a Kohen, and you offer the sacrifices there. But when you go up, it is not proper to use stairs, because stairs would expose part of the body, and that's not a proper way of making one's approach to Hashem. Instead, the altar had a ramp where it would be possible to walk up the ramp without taking too large steps, which would result in that exposing. That is the parasha. That means that we've begun to talk about mitzvot, and the next week's parsha will continue this theme with even more mitzvot. What I thought we would do is we would take a closer look at the very last part of the parasha, the part that I've just summarized. Here's the way the Torah says it. And among the issues that we need to deal with is not only what does it mean, but how do the ideas connect to each other? Why are they here in this order? Vayomer Hashem El Moshe, God said to Moshe, Ko tomar el bnei Yisrael, thus shall you say to the children of Israel, Atem ri'item, you have seen, Ki min hashamayim dibarti etchem, that from the heavens I have spoken with you. You've seen this, you've experienced it firsthand. Lo ta'asun iti, you shall not make with me. Elohei chesef ve'elohei zahav, lo ta'asun lachem. Gods of silver and gods of gold, you shall not make for yourselves. Mizbach adama ta'aseli. an altar of earth shall you make for me. V'zavachta alav, and you shall sacrifice upon it. Ve'et etolotecha v'et shalamecha, et sonecha v'et karecha. Shall sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your flock, meaning sheep and goats, and your cattle, your herd, meaning cattle. Every place where I will mention my name, I will come to you and I will bless you. Ve'im mizbach avanim ta'aseli, and if an altar of stones you will make for me, lo tivneten gazit, you shall not build them of dressed stones. Ki charbacha heinafta leha vatechalaleha, because your sword, as it were, you have wielded against it, and you have desecrated it. V'lo ta'aleh b'ma'alot al mizbechi, nor shall you go up to my altar using steps. Asher lo tigale ervatcha alav, so that your nakedness shall not be exposed on it. The real question is, how do these ideas fit together? We saw earlier that certainly the last part is talking about the right way and the wrong way to build an altar. Well, Rav Ovadia Sforno, Italian commentary of the early 16th century, has a lot to say about this in his very carefully chosen words. First, this is introduced with Atem ri'item ki min hashamayim dibarti imachem. You have seen that I have spoken to you from the heavens. Why does he start with this idea before continuing to the mitzvot? Says the Sforno that this is similar in idea to a verse that we have in Tehillim, that God is enthroned on high, but he sees what is below, meaning in our earthly realm. The way to understand this is, first of all, that I, Hashem, am enthroned on high. I exist on a very high plane, which you have no access to. However, my concern, my influence extends to the lower regions. And also a part of this, which is something that the Sforno will develop, is that for Hashem there really is no difference. Everything is part of God's realm, from higher to lower. So, since that's so, we now move on to the next idea. Lo tasuni ti Elohei zahav, you shall not make with me gods of silver. Explains the Sforno. Since you have seen from your own experience that you do not need any intermediary to come close to me, you were able to experience that, as we saw in the previous verse. You yourself saw that it is possible for there to be a connection between God and human beings directly, without any intermediary. Since that's so, don't make any gods of silver and gold like this to serve as intermediaries, because you don't need it. This is also obviously a foreshadowing of the sin of the golden calf, which, as we will explain when we come up to it, was really a mistake, a sin based on the notion of how to connect to God, directly or indirectly. But he's saying you experience direct connection with God, so you do not need an intermediary. And therefore, you can reach out to God in prayer at virtually at any time. Mizbach adama ta'aseli, shall make an altar of earth, the Sephardo explains, "V'gam kein also lo titzarech la'asot hechalot shel kesef v'zahav avanim mikarot leman karevet etchet." You do not need to make sanctuaries of silver and gold and precious stones in order that I will come close to you. You don't need anything like that. Aval yaspik mizbach adama, but an earthen altar, something that's simple, will suffice. God is everywhere. It's possible to connect to God directly. So therefore, in worshiping Hashem through sacrifice, you don't need anything very, very fancy. An earthen altar will suffice. And then the second part of the verse says, "B'chol hamakom asher azkir shemi," in every place that I will mention my name, says the Sephardo, any place I've mentioned my name or I've connected my name, she'evchar lebeit vad lehavdi, a place that I've chosen as a place of communion with my servant, any place that I have chosen. It could be Mount Sinai, it could be Moshe's tent, Ki'inyan hazkiro kinisgav shemo. As it says in the verse, his name is exalted. Hashem is exalted, therefore it's possible for Hashem to sanctify any place, any moment towards communing with Him. Avo elecha uberachticha, I will come to you and I will bless you. As long as a place is chosen for this purpose, then I will commune with you and I'll bless you. Says the Sephardo, continuing this idea, Lo titztarech limshoch hanhagati elecha be'emtzayim shel kesef v'zahav v'zulatam. You do not need to draw my influence. You do not need to attract my providence through intermediaries made of silver and gold or anything like that. Because in fact, I myself will come and bless you. This way of reading what's going on, namely that Hashem is everywhere, it's possible to reach out to Hashem and Hashem will reciprocate directly. And when you offer sacrifices, it could be very, very humble. This idea goes in line with an idea that the Sephardo has, an interpretation and understanding of events in the book of Shemot, which is different from what some others say. And that is that before the sin of the golden calf, according to the Sephardo, it was not necessary to have any sanctuary. It was possible to have an altar and to sanctify any place in order to be close to Hashem, and there is any place would have been suitable because an intermediary with Hashem is not necessary. It's only after the sin of the golden calf that shows that the children of Israel, the nation of Israel, are not yet ready for this level of closeness to Hashem everywhere. They showed that they need an intermediary. It was then to get them back to this ideal that Hashem commanded to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. That is the opinion of the Sephardo. The latter part of the verse says that if you do choose to build an altar made of stones, they may not be dressed stones. Why? Liyapotam, in order to make them look more impressive. An earthen altar is sufficient, and nothing more needs to be done in order to make them the stones appropriate, because that's not necessary. God, you can reach out to Hashem in this very humble way. The last verse says, "V'lo taleh b'ma'alot," do not go up to the altar using stairs. And this is a counterbalance to what's being said up until this point. Afal pi shelo atrichacha la'asot melachot v'yipuyim v'shochni b'telchechem. Even though I have not demanded of you to do various structures and improvements, attractive acts in order to make me dwell in your midst. I have not demanded anything like that. That's at one end. Humble is enough. Nevertheless, he shamer milinho kalutrosh b'mizbeach. Be careful about being disrespectful when you approach the top of the altar, referring to the physical exposure. In other words, it's important to be humble in one's approach to worshiping Hashem, because Hashem can be accessed, can be approached from anywhere. But do not go to the other extreme of being disrespectful, of being less than respectful in one's worship of Hashem. Well, I can do it anywhere. I can do it, and therefore I can do it anyway. No. Keep in mind that there must be a balance. It reminds me of the way that many of us find ourselves davening, praying nowadays, and under the Corona circumstances, that it's necessary to pray outside, which reminds us, like the Seforno says, that it is possible to worship Hashem, at least ideally, anywhere. But the place that we choose outside, we must inspect to make sure that it is clean. It doesn't have anything that would disqualify it, because you can't go to the other extreme, which would be to treat the worship of Hashem too casually. I thank you once again for joining me in the Parsha highlights and insights. Look forward to seeing you again next time. Once again, this has been Rabbi Avraham Fisher saying Shalom.